Chapter 91. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The fourth child is really born to fight. While sighing deeply, Yu Ziyu also felt a little sad, with his already terrifying physique, and with the muscle rhythm turning into an instinctive reaction. It was hard for Yu Ziyu to imagine that someone could fight the emperor crocodile at close range. Surrounding and killing would be fine, but forget it about the one-on-one challenge. You can't take care of yourself with a tail whipping. Just whip it a few more times and you'll be done with it. Divine Tree, now you understand why I don't want to fight him. With a muffled voice, the bull demon stood up with his head shaking. Well, I do understand. Nodding, Yu Ziyu also understood a little. Last time, after the two guys Nyoemo and Emperor Crocodile went out to look for food, Nyoemo seemed to be autistic and silent. From time to time, he even looked deeply. Glancing in the direction of Ling Tan, his eyes were complicated. Emotionally, this guy was frightened by the Emperor Crocodile. However, anyone who sees this pervert will have their scalp numb. How do you fight such a guy when you meet him? A face-to-face encounter, if you can't avoid it, it's a fierce slap. You react quickly, but Emperor Crocodile reacts even faster, and it's not just the reaction that's fast, it matches the rhythm of the muscles, and even the movements are fast. When the two are intertwined, with Emperor Crocodile in battle, you can only be passively beaten. Moreover, if you accidentally fail to keep up with his reaction, it will be over. The atavistic Emperor Crocodile will definitely let you experience the ferocity of prehistoric creatures. TSK. Smashing his head and mouth, Yu Ziyu also felt like he had picked up a treasure, but at this moment, Qing'er beside him seemed to have thought of something, and said with a low smile. Master, if you release the Emperor Crocodile, it won't be long before the entire mountain will be crawling under its terror. Really? Smiling, Yu Ziyu also said frankly. At least within the same level, there are very few creatures that can fight against the Emperor Crocodile. There are really not many people who can fight. With a smile in her eyes, Qing'er's gaze was also directed towards the direction of Ling Tan. At this time, she still had one sentence she didn't say. But, except me, yes, except Qing'er. As a wisp of ghost, Qing'er is already far more terrifying than his peers. After all, he is an alien like Yu Ziyu, so how can his combat power be limited by his level? Unless targeted, fighting beyond the level is as simple as eating and drinking, but, Qing'er has always been low-key and doesn't like to show up in front of people. So far, few mutated beasts have realized how terrifying this ghost-like woman in red makeup is. However, one thing is for sure, when they arrive, they will remember that the sacred tree will always be accompanied by a red shirt. At this moment, Yu Ziyu looked at the Ling Tan quietly, and asked Qing'er beside him. Qing'er, tell me, what would happen if I were to be released? Forehead. Listening to Yu Ziyu, who was suddenly a little excited, Qing'er pondered for a moment and responded tentatively. Will he become the Overlord? Overlord? That with a smile, Yu Ziyu finally thought of what he had overlooked. How could he raise a truly strong man in captivity? If it were other mutant beasts, birds like the peregrine falcon would be fine. Birds should read their nests. However, Emperor Crocodile, no, it should be said that Emperor Crocodile, White Tiger, and even Red Fox are all different. They should have been bathing in the fragrance of blood in the battle, but now they are trapped in Igu because of Yu Ziyu's protection, although Yu Ziyu would occasionally let them out for hunting. But hunting is still hunting. How could they experience the joy of killing without truly bathing in blood? Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu also took a deep breath. If you have poor talents, that's fine, but who gave you talents that are unmatched by countless mutated beasts? After leaving a meaningful word, Yu Ziyu also had concerns in his heart. At night, the canyon fell into a dead silence, with only snowflakes falling on the thick snow mat, which sounded like rustling, but made people feel even more lonely. And at this moment, boom! The clouds and mist were mixed with the wind and snow, roaring in an instant. In a trance, there was a great existence, slowly waking up. However, for a moment, a majestic voice also echoed through the mist. Come quickly. When the words fell, Yu Ziyu's branches were also flying one by one. Boom! As the mist rolled, a very empty field was left, and not long after, there was a fox roar, and in the distance, a red stream of light came parallel to the earth, crisscrossing it. With this, at the same time, Moo! With a dull cry, the bull demon who was out looking for food also trampled on the ground and launched a charge. Roar! Yawning lazily, the big white tiger slowly propped up his body. Not far away from him, the Lingtan trembled slightly, and a whirlpool rose again. In just a moment, the terrifying body of the emperor crocodile also emerged from the water. One after another, the entire misty mountains under the night sky were shaken, and, it's not just them, deep in the underground square, Brother Ping too, who was the defeated party, seemed to be going crazy ingesting spiritual energy. But now that he heard this voice, he didn't even hesitate and shot it out from the deep hole. One after another, in a blink of an eye, Yu Ziyu pushed away the fog, and the large empty land was filled. However, this is not Yu Ziyu's fault. The emperor crocodile and the white tiger were so huge that they alone occupied 1/3 of the open space. Moreover, because they are both powerful mutated beasts, they will not get too close to each other and are almost scattered everywhere. They are all strong men. How could they bow their heads so easily? However, those few humans were somewhat interesting. Under the leadership of Qing Fan, they decisively pulled them to a corner, but they stood in a row, with their heads held high and their chests held high, looking a bit like they were in military training. However, looking at them dressed in animal skins, Yu Ziyu couldn't help but laugh and cry. Everything in the canyon is good, except that there are no living supplies for humans. Yu Ziyu wanted to help them collect some, but then he thought about it and forgot about it. He kidnapped these humans to do hard labor, not for enjoyment. Moreover, looking at Qingfan's appearance, Yu Ziyu always felt that he seemed to be enjoying his current life. Of course, the one who enjoyed it the least was Qian Qin. As a delicate girl, she is no trouble. Not only does the animal skin have to be processed repeatedly to make it into clothes that girls can wear, but also they have to be careful about bathing at all times. She has never forgotten to this day that the entire tree house is made of the roots of the sacred tree. In other words, she could always catch the eye of the sacred tree while taking a bath in the tree house. Every time she thought of this, Qianqin's face turned red. But I have to say that girls have very complicated thoughts, because, at this point, Yu Ziyu himself had never considered it. To read the ununderlined version of the novel, please download Faloo. Chapter 92. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Slowly raise your eyes. What caught his eyes were pairs of very fiery eyes. Even the cold emperor crocodile, what Yu Ziyu saw was a touch of indescribable complexity. These little guys. With a sigh in his heart, Yu Ziyu also said in a deep voice. Now, you have each reached the pinnacle of entry. However, I cannot give you eternal protection. The faint voice echoed in the hearts of many mutated beasts, but it shocked their hearts. Lord. As if he realized something, Nyo slowly propped up his body and said in a muffled voice. The branches swayed slightly, and Yu Ziyu also took a deep look at Nyo, and then continued. Spiritual energy revives, all things rise, and the world is performing colorfully every moment. And you, as the proud sons of the times, should not be trapped in one place. Therefore, I give you choices and at the same time give you blessings. After saying this, Yu Ziyu's countless branches swayed slightly, scattering countless green crystals. Boom! In an instant, the pores dilated, and each mutant beast couldn't help but roar in a low voice. The three humans headed by Qing Fan even widened their eyes, because, at this moment, they actually felt the bottleneck is loosened and rich vitality fills the air. I guess, the methods of the sacred tree are really unimaginable. Looking at the countless green light rain, Qing Fan also showed a look of shock on his face. Such a large-scale baptism method is really beyond the understanding of ordinary people. Really? Nodding, Leng Feng also looked at his body. The moment countless light rain came into contact with his body, it melted into it instantly, and was replaced by a deep warmth. At the same time, the spiritual power was slowly boiling, and the speed was visible to the naked eye. Growth. However, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that he actually feels that his body seems to be cheering and jumping for joy, as if ushering in a new round of replacement, and there is an inexplicable comfort, rain of vitality, another application of life essence, which can awaken the deep vitality of the body while accelerating biological evolution. Looking at the mutated beasts with expressions of enjoyment in the falling light and rain, Yu Ziyu also smiled in her heart. Although this method is almost the same as the essence of life, it feels more comfortable and softer. At this time, if combined with the ability to induce hallucinations, a dual spiritual and physical enjoyment will be formed in a short period of time. It may even create an attachment. It is somewhat similar to the legend of the Holy See, baptism with God's blessing. However, if the Western Holy See really discovered Yu Ziyu's hands, they would not be able to help showing expressions of ecstasy. In this regard, Yu Ziyu also has the brainwashing intention of the Western Holy See, although he had the intention to release some mutated beasts, but this doesn't mean that he doesn't have the means to check and balance. In other words, the previous life essence was just a kind of spiritual fluid that could accelerate the evolution of all things. So now, Yu Ziyu is determined to make many mutated beasts dependent on this life essence. Among them, Rain of Life is the condensation of Yu Ziyu's thoughts. I don't like the word slavery very much, but the word dependence looks good to me. He pondered in his heart, and Yu Ziyu also smiled slightly. Of course, this time he summoned many mutated beasts, not all for the purpose of releasing them. The more important idea was to sow the rain of life, I guess once every half a month, if he persists for a long time. In the future, these mutated beasts will gradually become more dependent on him. And here, it is worth mentioning that the current 4 major beasts do not use such methods. In terms of resources, Yu Ziyu has invested the most in them, and like Ninetails, he and the bull demon also have the deepest feelings for him. As for the old 4th Emperor Crocodile, he seems to have an inexplicable affection for him for some reason. According to Yu Ziyu's guess, he should be grateful to the Emperor Crocodile. After all, Yu Ziyu used the essence of life to awaken him his natural talent. Returning to his ancestors, this kind of kindness is undoubtedly the gift of reincarnation in this extraordinary era. Although Emperor Crocodile is ferocious and cruel, but judging from its temperament, it is extremely emotional. The 4th child is loyal, cruel, and doesn't talk much. These words were not said by Yu Ziyu, it's a famous saying summed up by Qin Fan after recently getting along with Emperor Crocodile. With a smile in her heart, Yu Ziyu had almost made arrangements. Ninetails, Bull Demon, and Emperor Crocodile can be released, but not the 3rd White Tiger. He was originally a small leader in the Misty Mountain, and he had already been bathed in too much blood. And this guy is no better than the other brothers and sisters. To put it nicely, he is stupid, and to put it worst, he is smart. Yu Ziyu was really afraid that if he let this guy out, he would get into a lot of trouble. Of course, one thing is for sure, this guy is pretty good. The trouble caused is probably the kind of bloodshed. Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu once again turned his attention to the many mutated beasts and said softly. However, for your safety, you can only go out freely after reaching level 9. As for where to go, raising his eyes and looking at the Misty Mountains, Yu Ziyu also had something to worry about, and then added. Except for the southern part of the Misty Mountain, which is forbidden to human cities, you can set foot in the other directions. And when it comes to this, Yu Ziyu can't help but sigh at the geographical location of the Misty Mountains. It has to be said that its geographical location is really superior. The Misty Mountains, from west to east, span hundreds of kilometers, like a barrier, which just separates humans and animals. Separated by mountains, to the west of the Misty Mountains, there is a desert. When the desert reaches the end, you can see the inaccessible desert. If nothing else happens, it will also be a paradise for mutant beasts, among which there should be many with outstanding talents. A mutated beast with a talent for fire elements. In the east, there is a large river running across it. I don't know if it is due to the revival of spiritual energy, but Yu Ziyu can clearly detect the terrifying aspect of that river. The strong smell of blood flows along the strong wind. Come on, even if you drift into the Misty Mountains, it will be hard to dissipate for a long time. TSK. Yu Ziyu also understood clearly that the rivers lead directly to the ocean, and the ocean is the place where spiritual energy first arises. If there are no terrifying mutated fish monsters in that river, even if you kill Yu Ziyu, you won't believe it. More not to mention, rivers have always been rich in spiritual power, enough to attract a large number of mutated beasts and even birds. According to Yu Ziyu's guess, the terrifying river is probably ranked among the top 3 inland. Fei.lu reminds you, 3 things about reading. Collect. Chapter 93. You are listening at novelfull.audio. And here, the most noteworthy thing is the northern part of the Misty Mountain. the endless stretches of mountains and old forests are all green as far as the eye can see. If it weren't for the extremely high mountain that blocked Yu Ziyu spreading thick fog, it would have been included in Yu Ziyu's territory. However, even so, Yu Ziyu is still working tirelessly to break through the blockade of this mountain. Fog is an eye and a symbol of its territory, just as mutated beasts use scent to declare their territory. Yu Ziyu will also use the shroud of fog to include certain places into his territory. Of course, compared to the smell of mutated beasts, Yu Ziyu's mist is not only unpredictable, but also able to confuse perception. Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu's heart suddenly moved. At this time, it's almost time to strengthen the ability to spread dense fog. Yes, strengthening. Unlike before, you can upgrade your ability to LV2 just after reaching the first level of transcendence. Wait, when he reached the second level of transcendence, Yu Ziyu discovered that when he wanted to directly enhance his ability with evolution points, it turned out to be gray. As for the reason, Yu Ziyu had some guesses. 1. It may be that there are not enough evolution points. The second reason is that the LV3 ability is too powerful, far beyond what Yu Ziyu can master. Today, you must know that the third level of extraordinary is known as the disaster level, by humans, and is even called a terrifying existence that only big countries can deal with, and small countries can't deal with it even if they try their best. Such an existence, if it does not go through the accumulation of quantity, how can it have a qualitative sublimation? The improvement of spiritual power, from 100,000 to 99,000, is of course an accumulation of quantity. As for the development of capabilities, it is estimated that it will also take a long period of development and precipitation. The most terrifying thing about Yu Ziyu's evolutionary point is that it allows him to master abilities beyond his level of strength in advance. In other words, compared to the same level, his abilities are even more weird and unpredictable, far beyond others. Understand, in this way, you can also imagine why the thick fog released by a mere first-level extraordinary creature can cover hundreds of kilometers without dissipating. It can also be imagined that each branch of Yu Ziyu's tree roots is so powerful. Just 3 branches of the tree turned into a black python, which deeply suppressed the rock snake and even strangled it, because this is not an ability that belongs to this level. But now, Yu Ziyu has a feeling that he has almost settled down. In this way, he is almost ready. It's really fast. If nothing happens, he will have the ability of the first LV3 level in the near future. Call. Taking a deep breath, Yu Ziyu was also a little excited. However, for a moment, as if thinking of something, Yu Ziyu slowly raised his eyes, only to find mutant beasts, still looking at him with burning eyes. Cough. After a dry cough, Yu Ziyu also realized what he had overlooked. After a moment, he smiled, looked at these mutated beasts, and slowly said, "Until now, 4 of you have entered the 9th level." Speaking of this, Yu Ziyu's eyes also passed over these mutant beasts one by one. 9 tails, bull demon, white tiger, emperor crocodile. As Yu Ziyu called his name, these 4 guys seemed to be shocked by something. Kyubi's figure lying on the ground stretched slowly, as if stretching lazily, but the hair that seemed to be bathed in flames slowly flew up, and there were faint wisps of flames. Yes, flames. It was like a dream, as if fireflies in the middle of the night attracted everyone's attention. Even Yu Ziyu was no exception. Smiling, Yu Ziyu realized that this guy had also awakened his natural talent at some point. Moreover, not surprisingly, it should be the fire element talent. Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu's eyes narrowed slightly. In a moment, a series of information appeared in Yu Ziyu's eyes. Race, mutated red fox, level, enter the 9th level, born talent, fire control, like a darling of flames, born in fire, has the power to control flames. Special ability, charming eyes. Gorgeous eyes are the most precious treasure in the world. They have the magical power to penetrate people's hearts and break through hallucinations. What's even more frightening is that anyone who looks into this pair of eyes will notice. Infatuated with love, the spirit is in a trance. With a click of his tongue, Yu Ziyu looked at Joey's current attribute template, not too surprised. He didn't expect Brother Pingtu to awaken his natural talent of thunder and fury, but he had already guessed that 9 tails would awaken his talent of fire element. After all, the characteristics of Kyubi are too obvious. From a distance, it looks like a ball of flame, and from a close distance, it looks like it is covered in flame-like hair. This would be unreasonable if one does not awaken the fire element talent. Moreover, more importantly, Yu Ziyu firmly believed that Joe's natural talent would not be too weak. A mutated beast like her that was born with spirit and extreme intelligence should have its own uniqueness even if its natural talent was awakened. As for the fire attribute talent, as the most top talent, even if the Nine Tails awakens, it will not be buried. With a smile in her heart, Yu Ziyu turned her eyes and pulled her to the second Nyoemo again, as if aware of Yu Ziyu's gaze. The bull demon slowly propped up his body, followed by another bull cry. Moo. Along with such a powerful cry, the bull demon also said in a muffled voice. Sacred tree, I don't want to leave you. After a moment of silence, Yu Ziyu also sighed slightly. All right. Looking at Nyoemo's very persistent eyes, Yu Ziyu didn't know how to refuse, but, it's okay, Nyoemo doesn't like fighting, so less bloody baptism and more precipitation will have certain benefits for it, and in the final analysis, the bull demon is also a herbivore. After a bloody fight, it will not be good for it. After all, it cannot rely on flesh and blood to replenish its needs like the Nine Tails and White Tiger, but at this moment, it seems to have noticed something. Yu Ziyu's eyes suddenly came to the big white tiger, which was restless and eager to try. Looking at its body as big as a mountain, sometimes sitting up, sometimes lying down, looking restless and excited, Yu Ziyu's mouth twitched for a moment. Yu Ziyu couldn't help but interrupt him, and said coldly. By who, you can't go either. Silence, a rare silence, by whose movements froze, his eyes widened, staring at Yu Ziyu. It seems to say why. At this time, Yu Ziyu also said unabashedly. What qualifications does a 9th-level person who can't even communicate spiritually have to leave the foggy mountains? Is it to embarrass me? To read the ununderlined version of the novel, please download Faloo. Chapter 94. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Listening to the sound echoing in the mist, Baihu was stunned, completely confused. He blinked humanely, as if he wanted to argue, but for a moment, it opened its mouth. Roar was accompanied by a terrifying tiger roar, sound waves rolling, and the thick fog surrounding the plains turned into fog waves and spread out in all directions. As the king of beasts, the power of the roaring tiger forest cannot be overshadowed. At least when it roared, many mutated beasts trembled, and looked at the white tiger with a little more fear. However, with such a long roar, the white tiger felt even more aggrieved. It also wanted to speak, it also wanted to express what it meant, but when it opened its mouth, it roared. What could it do? And at this moment, hearing the white tiger's roar, Yu Ziyu even had a headache. How many times have I said that speaking relies on the spirit, not the mouth? Speaking of this, Yu Ziyu also couldn't understand. Joe and the bull demon can easily master the language. Even the old 4th Emperor Crocodile later learned to express a few simple sentences after a few days. For example, Lord Lington, although the voice of Emperor Crocodile is extremely cold, it can still express a few meanings. This white tiger is really impossible to teach. Until today, more than half a month has passed, and it can't even utter a word. Occasionally I want to say it, but I also scream loudly. Could it be that this guy is really not only stupid on the outside, but also on the inside? Suspicious in his heart, Yu Ziyu's eyes towards Baihu changed. For a moment, he sighed helplessly and looked at Baihu, who was very aggrieved. Yu Ziyu also said frankly. I'll give you another month. If you can master some spiritual transmission, I will allow you to go out. Yu Ziyu's words have just finished. Roar. An excited tiger roar shook the night sky. What made the other mutated beasts even more helpless was that this guy was jumping up and down like a child. I'm sure the third brother is a white tiger, not a white cat. While sighing sincerely, Qingfan's face couldn't help but look a little weird. To be honest, if the third brother's size were reduced by more than 10 times, he would be no different from the little white cat raised at home. But, compared with the little white cat raised at home, white cat, the third brother's naivety is really nothing to say. When hunting, I haven't noticed it yet, but at other times, it exudes a naivety from the inside out. It is 3 or 4 meters tall. The big white tiger jumped into the air, just to catch a butterfly. It jumped up and down on the outside of Bayou Canyon, just to play with the peregrine falcons. Of course, Qingfan would not really regard the third brother as by the first time he walked in when he was in a foggy cave, he encountered a mutated white tiger. He almost frightened him to death at that time. A tiger roar shocked the forest. Walking on foot, he carried the power of the king of beasts. After that, even more, he was seriously injured with one claw. That irresistible power and indescribable power have turned into a shadow in Qing Fan's heart for a long time, and it is such a king of beasts who usually it has such a naive energy. It must be said that this contrast really makes Qing Fan sigh, but at this time, after taking a deep look at the very excited white tiger, Yu Ziyu shook his head and turned his eyes. It has already been pulled on the emperor crocodile. Compared with the 9 tails, the bull demon and even the white tiger, what reassures Yu Ziyu the most is the emperor crocodile who has just arrived. Roar! An inexplicable sound vibrated in the air, and emperor crocodile slowly raised its vertical yellow pupils. Host! Go up! There was a rare hint of emotion in the cold voice. It seemed that this was the only way that Yu Ziyu could make his emotions fluctuate. However, it was indeed the case. Nodding, Yu Ziyu looked at the emperor crocodile and gave a rare instruction. Although you are extremely talented, you cannot defeat everyone by yourself. So, do you understand what I mean? Bright, white. The long crocodile's mouth clicked up and down, and the emperor crocodile also kept in mind the previous instructions of the sacred tree. If it encounters a large group of beasts, it must not be defeated. The first thing to do is to run, and the faster the better, and this is also because the reaction force brought about by the muscle rhythm of the emperor crocodile is like an instinctive ejection, but relatively speaking, the consumption of physical strength is also quite terrible, and Yu Ziyu has already seen this, and only gave repeated instructions. Like the emperor, it would be a pity if crocodile, a terrifying being with extraordinary talents and born for fighting, died of exhaustion. Shaking his head and suppressing his thoughts, Yu Ziyu also waved the branch to call back the dissipated thick fog. Disperse. After saying this, the entire Bayou Canyon returned to its original silence. Occasionally, there were a few insect chirps, which disappeared into the night in an instant. Ding, you killed a first-level mutant cricket. Your evolution points are +10. Listening to the voice coming from his ears, Yu Ziyu couldn't help but said to himself. How long has this been going on? Are there still many mutated insects that dare to come here? They are really tougher than the other. With a cold smile, Yu Ziyu's consciousness slowly sank into the depths of his body. For a being like him, sleep is no longer necessary. However, Yu Ziyu needs to use sleep to sink his consciousness into his body, so that in the true sense, the body is completely controlled. A body that is too huge is completely controlled in the true sense, just like those roots of Yu Ziyu, just like human hair. Occasionally, if one is missing, will humans notice? Of course not, and Yu Ziyu the same is true. Occasionally, a section of roots is eaten by some mutant beasts, and he has no idea about it. However, this will be completely eliminated after Yu Ziyu's consciousness completely sinks into his body. At this time, if anyone pays attention to the fog in the night of Big Mountain, you will definitely be horrified to find that countless roots like black pythons are slowly squirming and adjusting their positions. Sometimes they are hidden in the weeds, and sometimes they are deep into the cracks of the rocks. Of course, most of them disappeared in a flash, dragging the mutated beasts active late at night into the ground, leaving behind a patch of hair or blood. Ding, you killed the mutant rat that entered the second level. Evolution point is 20. Ding, you killed the first level mutant weasel, and your evolution points will be increased by 10. One after another, it was like celestial music, making the corners of Yu Ziyu's mouth turn up slightly. There is no more pleasing sound than this. If there is one, it would be more points of evolution. Faloo reminds you, 3 things about reading, collection. Chapter 95. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, early in the morning, I woke up from a hazy state. However, through the mist, Yu Ziyu was clearly aware of the long gaze of the 2 figures. At the western end of the misty mountain, there is a cliff top. Seems to have noticed Yu Ziyu waking up. Howl. A fox whistle shook the sky. Immediately afterwards, Kyubi slowly propped up his body, and his gorgeous eyes focused on the Bayou Canyon, flashing a flash of splendor. Go ahead, Kyubi. My heart moved slightly. Yu Ziyu also used the control of the mist to transform the two characters' 9 tails that Jiu Wei first learned in the sky filled with white mist. Looking at it blankly, Jiu Wei didn't say much. Instead, he looked like a human being. She closed her paws and bowed to Yu Ziyu, then turned into a stream of red light and headed straight for the desert. She is a mutant beast with the fire attribute. She can only find deserts with strong fire elements and even the end of the desert, the inaccessible place. In the desert, there is a greater chance of her success, if she is lucky enough to find some very good fire attribute spiritual flowers and herbs. Maybe in a few days, Ninetails will return on a wave of fire, and except for Ninetails beyond the tail, on the other side, there is Crocodile on the bank of a big river, with its head and tail intersecting, entrenched next to a big rock somewhere, as if sleeping. Roar! Inexplicably shaken, Emperor Crocodile slowly raised its head. Have a safe journey. There was a chuckle in my heart. Looking at this ferocious crocodile, Yu Ziyu also gave me a blessing. At this time, it seemed that I was aware of Yu Ziyu's blessing. The Emperor Crocodile also nodded slightly, stepped forward with its thick short legs, and faced the crocodile. Walking along the big river not far away. This big river is one of the few rivers in the Misty Mountains that directly connects to the Eastern River, and if you swim along this river, it won't take long for Emperor Crocodile to reach the river where the fight is the most brutal. At that time, Yu Ziyu believed that this river would usher in another top predator. Alas! With a sigh, Yu Ziyu bid farewell to the two beasts. Yu Ziyu's eyes were drawn to the Bayou Canyon. Compared with before, it suddenly felt a lot emptier. Bai Hu had honestly gone to Qing Fan to learn calligraphy, and Brother Pingtu was still working hard in the underground square. Absorbing spiritual stones, their whole bodies are covered with bright electric light. The armored wild boars and golden monkeys form a team, wandering around the Bayou Canyon. If you look at this pair at this moment, you will definitely find a very interesting one. That's what happened. The golden monkey sat on the tall armored wild boar very domineeringly, holding a bunch of fruits in his hand, nibbling a bite from the left and a bite from the right. It looked so cool. This guy. Sighing, Yu Ziyu was helpless. The golden monkey is not weak in talent. If he can restrain his stubbornness, he can try to sit down with Yu Ziyu to compete with the four beasts. Pity, at this point, he is worse than Brother Flathead, but Brother Flathead knows his shame and is brave enough to work hard, but, forget it, don't think about it anymore. Some things cannot be forced, and Yu Ziyu is not willing to force them. Rather than restricting others, it is more practical to strengthen yourself. Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu's consciousness changed and she had already pulled up the attribute panel. Thick fog spreads, causing hallucinations, mutating tree roots, mutating branches, manipulating earth elements, and the recently extended main tree root, Hualong. Looking at each ability, Yu Ziyu also knew all the treasures, among them, except for the main tree root, transforming into a dragon, which is a LV1 level ability. The other 5 major abilities are all LV2 level. Yu Ziyu actually wanted to continue the evolution point and push the main tree root's ability, Dragon Transformation, to level 2. Unfortunately, the evolution point required was too terrifying. Even when Yu Ziyu saw it now, he was twitching. With 100,000 evolution points, Yu Ziyu felt like he could strengthen his whole body. However, considering that the purpose of his transformation into a dragon from a tree root was to pierce the planet and use the planet as nourishment, Yu Ziyu also smiled and said nothing. Such a terrifying ability is worth every evolutionary point. However, the only pity is that the current Yu Ziyu does not have enough evolution points. Otherwise I would not mind and smash him hard, and now, Yu Ziyu can only polish these level 2 abilities one after another. Moreover, Yu Ziyu is also looking forward to it now. How terrifying the L3 level ability is, as a terrifying ability that can only be possessed by a disaster level existence of an enemy country. Yu Ziyu believes that it will not let him down. Call. Taking a deep breath, Yu Ziyu also looked solemn. Thick fog spreads, causing hallucinations, mutating branches, mutating roots, and even manipulating earth elements. Among the 5 level 2 abilities, Yu Ziyu is most familiar with dense fog. As for the rest, there is still more or less some precipitation missing. For example, Yu Ziyu has not yet mastered the control of the earth element, and until now he has not been able to completely sink himself into the depths of the earth, and the hallucinogenic ability is even more bizarre and unpredictable. Even if Yu Ziyu wants to control it, he is powerless. And the last mutated branches and roots, as a part of Yu Ziyu's body, their strengthening must be a long and lasting process, and Yu Ziyu is not willing to wait too long. In this way, the best choice for Yu Ziyu now is to spread the thick fog. Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu also chuckled. System, I want to strengthen the ability to spread thick fog. After finishing speaking, a very crisp system prompt sounded suddenly in Yu Ziyu's ears. Ding, are you sure you want to spend 10,000 evolution points to strengthen the L2 level ability dense fog diffusion? 10,000 evolution points. My heart twitched hard. Yu Ziyu suppressed the shock and said dryly, confirm. He NND. Fortunately, he still has an inventory of 14,000 evolution points, otherwise he would not be able to afford even this time's evolution points. However, now, it seems that he will also be drained by this enhancement. Cough. With a dry cough, Yu Ziyu thought about the strengthening of the mutant branches and roots. That's the big deal. Well, it is estimated that he will not be able to break through to the third level of transcendence in a short time. However, one thing should be certain. If his peak spiritual power reaches 700,000, 800,000, or even 900,000, and he has several level 3 abilities at his side, humans should have nothing to fear. At least, to a certain extent, he already has the qualifications to be on an equal footing with the race that has dominated this planet for thousands of years. And this is the charming existence of individual continuous evolution. The powerful individual force is enough to overthrow everything. No wonder everything is crazy about it. At that time, if Yu Ziyu's power could take shape and dominate one side, what would be the difficulty? Thinking of this, Yu Ziyu couldn't hide her excitement. But at this moment, boom! There was a loud noise, and Yu Ziyu's mind suddenly shook, like a thunderous explosion, and his consciousness suddenly returned to chaos. At the same time, the mist covering the misty mountain trembled slightly, but it began to undergo unknown changes. _C, please download Faloo for the non-underlined version of the novel. Chapter 96. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Within the Federal Territory, the Spiritual Power Monitoring Bureau, codenamed 7123, is a small spiritual power monitoring point. What happened? In a very solemn voice, a female soldier wearing a white military uniform and looking very heroic came to the small spiritual monitoring center for the first time. Report, sir. A soldier trotted over from the side, performed a military salute, and said with a serious face, just 2 minutes ago, there was a large-scale spiritual movement in the misty mountain. As he said this, the soldier also pointed to the screen not far away and added in a low voice, until now, the fluctuations in spiritual power are very abnormal, but there is no upward trend. Abnormal, but no upward trend, muttered suspiciously. Yan Lengling also took a few steps forward. For a moment, what caught his eyes was a pair of blue lines that were constantly fluctuating like an electrocardiogram. However, what is surprising is that these blue lines hovered between 3 and 3. Around 1,000 to 5,000, there has never been an increase. Generally speaking, rapid fluctuations mean that spiritual power is disordered and there are signs of a sudden increase in spiritual power. However, the lack of an increase denies the possibility of a sudden increase in spiritual power. Call. Taking a deep breath, Yan Lengling also had a look of doubt on her face. Although she had just walked out of the Spiritual Power Research Institute, because of her very good talent and comprehensive results that could be called a top student, she climbed up to a small spiritual power monitoring station, the station masters, at a terrifying speed. Location. But now, she has only been in office for a few days, and she has encountered this kind of thing. Pressing the brim of his white hat, Yan Lengling knew it was time to report to his mentor and the others. Such strange things are not something she can solve. Of course, before reporting it to her instructor, she felt the need to discuss it with a very powerful senior. Thinking of this, Yan Lengling, who was under the white brim of his hat, suddenly pursed his lips and revealed a sweet smile. However, if the animals at the #1 Spiritual Power Research Institute knew about this, they might be howling like ghosts and wolves. You know, Yan Lengling lives up to her name, but she is one of the rare cold beauties in the #1 Research Institute. Making her smile is harder than reaching the sky, and because of her good talent and fair strength, she is also known as a goddess trend. However, a trend can always be a trend. After all, there is only one goddess recognized by Research Institute number 1, and that is Flaming Lady, a strange woman who walked out of the mountains. Until now, no one knows how strong this girl is. Not many people have seen her true face. All we know is that Yen Ji, who covers her face with either a white mask or a black peaked cap, has an unshakable status in the number 1 Spiritual Power Research Institute, being able to suppress 99% of the people with one person's strength, and being a female figure under the age of 18, one can imagine the status of Yen Ji in the hearts of everyone. However, what few people know is that a woman as sacred and inviolable as Yen Ji actually has several best friends. No, you shouldn't call them best friends, a better term would be a little fangirl, or a confidant. He is proud to follow Yen Ji, and is responsible for taking care of Yen Ji's daily chores. At this point, Gao from the number 1 Spiritual Energy Research Institute recognized it. However, considering Yen Ji's status and strength, countless people would not admit that she was indeed qualified. In this way, Yen Ji is also the number 1 Spiritual Power Research Institute, one of the few with a small organization. At this time, one thing is worth mentioning. There are many boys who want to get close to Yen Ji, but the number of boys who can say anything to Yen Ji is no more than 5 fingers. Even the talented young man who brought Yen Ji back, Yen Gaoyuan, is from time to time. It was a shame in front of Yen Ji. Fortunately, one day he boasted in front of his brothers, "Linger, you treat me like an elder brother." At that time, from Dashan. Then a moment, as if aware of the deathly silence around him, Yen Gaoyuan raised his head in shock, only to see a girl wearing a peaked cap, with a very hot figure and long hair like a flame slowly walking past him. At this time, Yen Ji seemed to notice Yen Gaoyuan's gaze, and she nodded slightly, and immediately left with a wisp of fragrant wind. Forehead. His face was slightly startled. Before he could speak, a group of his brothers were already blind. Blowing, "You continue to brag, treat you like an elder brother? Ha ha ha, you made me laugh so hard, just pretend to be fat." "No, don't say that." Yen Ji just nodded and said hello to him. "Indeed, but it's really scary. In front of Flame Fairy, I don't even dare to express my anger." Yen Gaoyuan's face turned red amid the laughter and joking. Is this TMD science? Not long ago, Linger was very clingy and kept asking him questions, and at this moment, a very mysterious place. Toot, toot, toot. As a satellite phone rang, a red-haired girl frowned slightly. Satellite phones are a product of the times. Due to their high cost, they have not been popularized until now. They are mostly used by the military, but there is no way around it. With the revival of spiritual energy, the planet's magnetic field has fallen into chaos, and most of the electronic communications have lost their effectiveness. And the place that can be used is only one city. People in 2 places in this city can be used for communication. To put it more seriously, due to the failure of electronic communications, each country's control over the region has been greatly weakened. For example, in certain countries, cities have become self-reliant and separatists have become kings. In this way, in order to slow down this phenomenon, relevant national departments have also launched another type of satellite communication that surpasses electronic communication. It's just a pity that the cost of satellite phones is so high that ordinary people can't afford them. Only some genius men and women at the Psychic Research Institute or rich businessmen and powerful people can have them. Who is the one? Frowning her brows, the girl couldn't help but mutter to herself. She didn't like contact with people, but sometimes, she had to contact them. Alas! After sighing, the girl slowly picked up the satellite phone. "Senior sister, something strange happened in the Misty Mountain you asked me to pay attention to." Before the girl could speak, a very cold voice came. Weird thing, that the tone was calm. Linger didn't seem to be moved at all. "Yes, it's strange. The spiritual power fluctuations in the Misty Mountains are suddenly very abnormal, but there is no upward trend. I can't judge whether it is a precursor to a surge in spiritual power." Listening to what this girl named Yen Lenling said, Linger did not respond directly, but asked, "Have you told your instructors?" "Not yet. I am thinking that your hometown is in the Misty Mountains, senior sister, so I want to say hello to you in advance. Good. Nodding, Linger's mouth corners secretly raised a bit, and then she said calmly. Don't worry, it shouldn't be a big deal. Don't bother your mentor and the others about this matter. They have been struggling with that experiment recently. Said, Linger pondered for a moment, and then added. You first pay attention to the foggy mountains, and then write a report to me. I will check it for you. If necessary, I will come there myself. Okay, Senior Sister Linger. Listening to Senior Sister Linger's sudden arrival, Yen Lengling's face was filled with confusion. There was a hint of excitement, and this kind of excitement is no less than that of some fanatic fans when they see a star. However, the only pity is that Yen Lengling's fanaticism is still somewhat rational. Even if Linger is not careful, he will be easily exposed. Faloo reminds you, 3 things about reading, collection. Chapter 97. You are listening at novelfull.audio. And just when the Misty Mountains were noticed by humans due to the abnormal fluctuations in spiritual power, deep in the Misty Mountains. Hoo, ho, ho. Accompanied by roars that seemed to come from ancient times, countless mists were constantly changing, pulling out strange monsters one after another in an instant. These monsters are very strange, but they all look ferocious, as if they are roaring. Along with their roars, an inexplicable sound echoed uncontrollably deep in the Misty Mountains. What's even more disturbing is that these monsters transformed from clouds and mist are all lifelike. At first glance, it seems like the real thing. No. It's true, because, at the very next moment. Roar. Accompanied by a very dull roar, a large tree hugged by tree men was actually bitten off by a monster transformed from clouds. How can this be? Looking at the cloud fox in the sky, which was dozens of meters in size and had 9 tails, Qing Fan also opened his mouth. Originally, he just thought that this was the cloud shadow that Master Shinshu fabricated at will, but in a moment, there was only a click sound, and a very thick tree had been bitten off. With 10,000 grass and mud horses galloping past in his heart, Qing Fan couldn't help but doubt his life. It's fake. This must be false. Amid the murmur, Qing Fan was suddenly startled, because, at this moment, Master Shinshu seemed to hear his thoughts. Roar. There was another roar, and the clouds rolled and turned into a vortex. At the same time, a cloud lizard with wings on its back was pulled out of the whirlpool 10 meters away from him. I wipe. The monster screamed. Qing Fan was startled by this monster. Then, after looking at this very familiar appearance, he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly exclaimed. Dragon. Yes, the giant dragon. The mythical creature in Western legends is a symbol of strength and power. At this moment, the giant dragon pulled out of the clouds looked at Qing Fan with contempt, and then a roar. Roar. Like a dragon's roar, it tore through the clouds and mist, and the wind and waves visible to the naked eye suddenly rolled back. Qing Fan, who had no time to react, was blown away by the wind and waves, and flew out like a kite that had lost its string. However, at this time Qing Fan was shocked to find that he seemed to be fine. Forehead. He did a very good backflip in the air and landed smoothly. Qing Fan looked at his body and found that there was really no big problem. However, for some reason, the terrifying scene of a roaring dragon still lingered in his mind. Lying on the ground, the dragon wings spread out, followed by a roar, and suddenly, the clouds and mist in the sky turned over. If this was the first time I saw him, I would probably be scared to death rather than being blown away by the air waves. This is so fucking scary, it's simply not something a villain can bear. However, thankfully, Qing Fan thinks his heart is still big enough to accept it. Of course, it's just acceptable. If you come here a few more times, he will be scared. And at this moment, hidden in the depths of the clouds and mist, Yu Ziyu looked at this scene with a slight curl of the corner of her mouth. Not bad. However, these are just Yu Ziyu's humble words. At this time, Yu Ziyu's heart is filled with joy. It's too strong, it's too strong. The LV3 thick fog is simply a cheating skill. His eyes focused, a series of information has been printed in Yu Ziyu's mind. Control of mist, LV3, you can handle it freely and move at will. While the mist serves as Yu Ziyu's eyes, it can also be ever-changing and turn into whatever you want. It was a very simple introduction, but Yu Ziyu knew that it was far from being as simple as the introduction. Because these monsters transformed from clouds and mist depend on Yu Ziyu's cognition, the clearer Yu Ziyu understands this creature, the more realistic the clouds and mist transform. What's even more terrifying is that the closer these mist are to Yu Ziyu's body, the more terrifying Yu Ziyu's control over them becomes. In other words, at the edge of the misty mountains, the monsters transformed by Yu Ziyu's clouds and mist are only similar in appearance but not in spirit. Of course, more may not even be similar in form. However, if it is pulled near Bayou Canyon, Yu Ziyu can easily pick out the most realistic fog beast. Yes, fog beast. This is how Yu Ziyu got his name. A large amount of mist has been condensed, making them immortal and capable of moving at will. What is even more frightening is that under the accumulation of a large amount of mist, they are almost able to turn into entities and make substantial attacks. Just like just now, Yu Ziyu controlled the fog beast to bite off a big tree. In fact, too many clouds and mist condensed together, turning the void into reality, and then swallowed in an instant, directly squeezing the big tree to burst. However, to outsiders, it was indeed the fog beast that bit it into pieces, of course, until now. The attacks caused by these fog beasts turning into reality are not very strong. At most, they are attacks launched by low-level or even mid-level mutant beasts. If you want to break through the defense when encountering extraordinary first-level creatures, more difficult than ever, but does Yu Ziyu need the insignificant attack from the fog beast? No, of course not. The reason why he was excited now was because he saw a possibility. The more singular the ability, the easier it is to be cracked. Most of the truly powerful abilities are composite abilities. Simple control of the fog may not be enough to threaten a powerful existence, but with such unpredictable atomization, Yu Ziyu can easily make the false come true and the imaginary become real by combining it with the ability to induce hallucination. The control of the fog can give the fog beast shape changes, and the falsehood is already elusive. However, by using the ability to cause hallucinations and confuse people's perception, Yu Ziyu believed that ordinary people, no, even some powerful mutated creatures would have difficulty distinguishing true from false. At this time, the fog beast has the so-called destructive power, TSK. It won't be long before a new race will be born in this world. The mist beasts are a formless race that is unpredictable, but has incredible abilities. But that's not the scariest thing. What's really scary is that the fog beast is not afraid of physical attacks. And what does this mean? The guns that humans rely on most will lose their so-called threat. From then on, the entire Misty Mountain became a restricted area for humans. Humanity will stop until there is no absolute means to deal with this weird race of fog beasts, because no one wants to die. When guns lose their power, who dares to walk into the mountains? At that time, all Yu Ziyu had to do was to quietly control the mist beast race behind the scenes. Of course, if necessary, Yu Ziyu can also show the unimaginable power of the fog beast to some humans and even some extraordinary creatures. With the help of tree roots buried deep in the ground, Yu Ziyu can easily burst out with strength that tears the earth apart and shakes the sky. But these tree roots are wrapped by the body of the fog beast. In other words, Yu Ziyu will only see one kind of scene, that is, the Misty Mountain, giving birth to a strange existence, and these beings cannot leave the Misty Mountain, but they are powerful beyond imagination. The weak ones are, at best, of lower level strength, and the strong ones can have terrifying combat power of the first level of extraordinary, or even the second level of extraordinary. P.S. Please give me flowers and collect them. Somewhat brain-burning. However, those who have watched Spider-Man Expedition 3 should understand. Here, Crimson has a reference meaning. By the way, Crimson is trying to update 10 times today. I hope you can support me a lot, okay? Asterisk. For example, a few more customizations. To read the ununderlined version of the novel, please download Faloo.